Oh, we're back. So we talked about the homemade leverage, and that's what kept that makes that net operating income model work. The other thing that they came up with is, if you remember the first hour, I said with the net operating income, the value of the firm is constant. And what changes is if we issue more debt, then the stock goes down, but the value of the stock and debt always, the total of those two always remains constant. That's what's meant by a constant value to the firm. And some people question, well, how could you change the amount of debt and the amount of stock and always have that thing come out exactly the total equal to it? And so they came up with the concept known as arbitrage. So ARBITRAGE, and my knowledge of linguistics falls completely apart. It sounds like a French word to me, but the root of the word arbitrage, I have absolutely no idea. It turns out that there's two definitions or explanations of the word arbitrage. One of them is what we call the classical, and the other one is the M&M version of it. Because like a lot of things, they didn't like what we classically mean by it. But arbitrage is an ancient and honorable way to make money on Wall Street. This is a way to make money. And this is the classical definition of the word arbitrage. So come straight ahead and let me talk, and then we'll put some words down there for that. We're all familiar with the commodity known as gold. A lot of us wear chains and whatever, earrings and down the line. I won't go down that. But there's a lot of people that have gold, and they really like that stuff. If I have 24 karat gold someplace in Asia, and I have 24 karat gold someplace in Africa, and I have 24 karat gold in South America, and 24 karat gold in Europe and North America, do I essentially have the same commodity? And the answer is, yeah, if I got 24 karat gold, I've got 24 karat gold. And if I have 1 ounce of it in each of those different countries or continents, I've got the same amount of gold. Now, what if gold, there's two main markets for gold that I know of in the world. One is in New York and the other one is in London. What if gold in New York were selling at $2,000 an ounce? And gold in London were selling at $1,500 an ounce. Is there an opportunity to make money? Remember, an ounce of gold in New York and an ounce of gold in London, same thing. It's any place you go in this world. So we got one part of the world we can buy it for $1,500 an ounce. Another part of this world we can buy and or sell it for $2,000 an ounce. If that were true, and you had some money in your pocket, probably a lot of money in your pockets, could you make money on that? Yeah. How could you make money? Well, if it were selling for $1,500 in London, I could buy a lot of it in London. And if the dealers in New York were paying $2,000 an ounce, I could sell it in New York. And as much of it I could buy in London and sell in New York, I'd be making $500 an ounce, and I'd be a pretty wealthy person very, very quickly. And there are people that do that. And that's the classical meaning of the word arbitrage, where we take, let's write it down here, have a homogeneous product. Gold. Is that good? Homogeneous product? Homogeneous means the same product. Selling at different prices. Selling at different prices on two markets. You buy on the lower price And key word here, simultaneously sell on the overpriced. Simultaneously, we're going to need more room here. Sell on the overpriced. That make sense? Is that what I talked about? Buy it in London, sell it in New York. It's a homogeneous product. What's the net result? Net result, price is equal, right? Price is equal. And that's done all the time. There are people who've written computer programs whose computers sit there and just continuously check the prices of all these homogeneous products around the world. And when one market gets a little bit high and another product gets a little bit low, they're buying infinite quantities on one market and selling it on the other and bringing the two markets together. This has been done for hundreds of years. Now, back hundreds of years ago, if you had to buy it in London, you had to actually hire a ship and load it on the ship and ship it to New York. In today's world, all you're doing is you're not even buying the gold, you're just buying certificates which say you bought the gold, because the gold is all in Fort Knox or some other similar place like that. And so all we're doing is changing ownership. And by doing that, we're driving the markets around the world into equilibrium. You could take the same thing for a stock price. Take GE stock. If GE stock were sold in New York, in San Francisco, and Hong Kong, and Frankfurt, and all four of those markets, and if there were different prices around the world, what would happen? Somebody would be buying it in the underpriced market, selling it in the overpriced market. They'd have little computer programs written to do that, and they would drive the prices into equilibrium. And there are people that are called ARBs, arbitrageurs, and they make an honest living doing that. That's not illegal, in my mind, not unethical or immoral or anything of that nature. You're just forcing the markets into equilibrium. And anytime you can find a distortion where it's overpriced one place and underpriced another, you have the opportunity to make money, and that's what M&M said was the classical meaning of the word arbitrage. Done all the time. And then they said, that's not what we mean by it. Our definition is a little bit different. Now, when M&M got done and they said this is arbitrage, well, people jumped all over, and I've been explaining to you what it is. But people said, you're not really doing arbitrage, you're doing what we call switching. So it's no longer arbitrage. M&M's definition of arbitrage really got meant into something called switching. Come straight ahead here, and then we'll put some words down on this one. Remember I said the value of the firm is constant. The value of the firm is constant, and the amount of debt and plus the amount of stock is going to equal that constant amount. Well, what if they're not? What if something happens so that after we've issued more debt or sold more stock, the value of the debt plus the value of the stock changes? They said, this is arbitrage. We can jump in and do something about that. In actual practice, what you would do is you would switch from the underpriced security, or buy the underpriced security and sell the overpriced security. So we have two securities. They're out of whack with each other for whatever reason, so that the relationship between the two securities is not appropriate. You would switch. You would sell. Can I put it up here? Sell the overpriced security and buy the underpriced security. Once again, you'd be forcing equilibrium. They're no longer doing a homogeneous commodity. They got two commodities. Let me give you an example of this. Supposing a company announces they're going to buy out another company, and they're going to give you 3 shares of their stock for each share that you currently own. So there's some, and the prices of the 2 securities out in the marketplace are not right after that supposedly 3-for-1 switch. So what the arbitrageurs would do is whichever one of those 2 is worth more, the 3 of one versus the 1 of the other, whichever one is more, they'd sell that one and buy the one that's underpriced. And they'd switch back and forth between those 2 securities. So that's what M&M would said would happen here. Now everybody kind of went, I don't know about this. And it turned out that about 25 years ago, Modigliani got his Nobel Prize in economics. Now, whenever you get your Nobel Prize, the press wants to talk to you. And for whatever reason, Modigliani wasn't available. I don't know if he didn't expect to win it or for whatever reason they couldn't find him. But they ran into Merton Miller. And they said, Professor Miller, congratulations on you and your partner, at least your partner, getting the Nobel Prize in economics. He said, thank you. That was really nice. I mean, it was a group effort, you know, so he kind of took it as, even though it was the other guy's name, he took it as a kind of a pat in the back for him. And then the press said, well, you know, this thing you call arbitrage, we don't understand it. Can you explain it to us any better? So Professor Miller came up with an explanation of arbitrage. And that's what I'm going to give you now. And this is always on my exam. So you got to get this. Professor Miller's explanation of arbitrage. Now, people in class are all young snots. They don't understand this kind of stuff. But when I was a kid, instead of milk coming in these plastic jugs that we now get, milk used to come in, and not gallon jugs, milk used to come in 1-quart bottles. Anybody in the live class ever remember seeing milk in a 1-quart bottle? That's what I thought. You're all too young. Thank you. You're all making me feel old. But it used to be a glass bottle. And if you're really lucky, a milkman driving around would deliver these bottles, glass bottles, quart bottles of milk. Now, back in the day, you could take that 1-quart bottle of milk and put it in the refrigerator to keep it overnight. And when you woke up the next morning, if you looked at that 1-quart bottle, it looked kind of strange to you. Why? Because on the top of it, depending how good the milk was, anywhere from a ½ inch to a couple inches would be cream. And on the bottom would be all just kind of milky stuff, which we now call skim milk. So back when I was a kid, now that's, 10, 15 years ago, a long time ago, milk was delivered that way. And when you bought milk, if you let it set without any effort, you didn't have to do anything, just let it set overnight, it would separate into cream and skim milk. Now, let me ask you a question. If you were a farmer back in that era, you wanted to make as much money as possible. Assuming you want to make as much money as possible. Would it be more profitable for the farmer to take the milk coming out of the cow and sell it as whole milk? Or would the farmer have gotten more money by letting that milk sit overnight, taking the cream, skimming the cream off the top, and selling the cream as one product and the skim milk as another product. In case you don't know it, folks, cream's very expensive. I don't know if you ever had whipped cream on something, but it's really, really good. But it's also really, really expensive to buy. Clogs up the ticker too, so that's not really healthy for you. It's just pure butter fat. But if you really get that type of stuff and you get it whipped up, it's really, really good. It's really expensive. And relatively speaking, especially back in a period ago, now it's no longer true because they charge the same for all different kinds of milk. But back then, skim milk was really cheap, and the cream, that butter cream that you could whip up into whipped cream and stuff, was really, really expensive. If we had arbitrage, what would happen? No, if we had arbitrage, the total price that you got from selling the cream, the expensive cream, and the cheap skim milk would be exactly equal to the whole milk if you sold it straight from the cow. There's no benefit from selling cream and skim versus whole milk. I just explained arbitrage. Now let's take the analogy. Let's go through this whole thing here now. You got to be able to explain the analogies. We have a firm. The analogy is a cow. The firm generates EBIT. The cow generates milk. The EBIT is split between two sources. Well, let's do the milk first. The milk can be split between two sources. What were they again? Cream and skim milk. How does the EBIT get split? Between the stockholders and bondholders. Which one is the cream and which one is the skim milk? Who gets more return? Stockholders. So cream is stock, and the skim milk is the bondholders. How can I... Is that right? I got a green one here. Is that showing up green? Total value of stock and bond is constant, however we split it. And the milk is equal to the cream. Oops. Plus skim. Skim. If that is true, that is an explanation of arbitrage. If that is true, that is an explanation of arbitrage. The conclusion, the summary of that is total value of firm is independent of the debt equity ratio. That's the NOI model. Now, come straight ahead on me here. This was work that was done about 50 years ago. And it was done where they assumed taxes were equal to zero. Once somebody pointed out, wait a minute, we don't live in a tax-free world. How's this going to work, M&M, when we bring taxes in there? Remember, taxes bias business decisions? Well, it turned out that there's an advantage to being able to write off interest. So when M&M got done, this whole model just got changed all around. And so there's all different kinds of variations of it. You can get a more advanced text out there, and they'll go through all these variations. And I have no intentions of doing it. So if you take a second level course at the graduate level in finance, you'll go through all these models. And the net conclusion will be, even from M&M, is because of the tax advantage, we're better off using more debt. Now, the main thing that happened out of all this was, previous to Modigliani and Miller, people just used very small amounts of debt. It was said, be conservative, never borrow too much money, don't get yourself in trouble. If you bought a house, put a big down payment on it. If you're a corporation, never get more than a 1-to-1 ratio between debt and stock. Never, ever do that. It was kind of, oh, don't ever do that. After M&M, people got thinking about all this crazy nonsense. And we got people in the last 20 or 30 years who got into something called financial engineering. And they were people who had undergraduate degrees in math and science and engineering and so forth. And they took all that math and science and they built all these very complex models. And the net result was they ended up borrowing more and more money. And it looked like they were making money for their businesses. So we had, from like 2000 to 2008, we had a lot of these investment banks. They were just pouring in money until something bad happened and all their models fell apart. And we darn near bankrupted the banking system because of all this. So they were kind of, in many respects, the impetus to get all of this thing going, and the net result was we just got way too over financially levered. And when something happened bad, because of the multiplication of profits and losses of financial leverage, we almost blew up the economy. And so right now we're going back to baby steps, but what we're finding is that financial people are like one of the original computers where when you turned it off, their memory shut off. And we're only 4 years past the big meltdown, and we're starting to see people start to over financial leverage. And we had J.P. Morgan, the big bank out there. They lost, we don't even know how much they lost because they can't figure out with all their models. They don't even know what they lost. The estimates are somewhere between $2 billion and $4 billion at the time I'm doing this class. Now, those of you that are watching this in later semesters, you'll probably see more data. But the number originally came out at $2 billion, and it's been inching up closer and closer to $4 billion. It might even be more than that by the time they get done on this whole thing. And it all started with Modigliani and Miller and putting into play the whole concept of let's use a lot of leverage. Now, I'm not going to ask you that. I'm going to ask you, make sure you know arbitrage, make sure you know the cow example, make sure you know homemade leverage, make sure you give me numerical examples of NI, NOI, etc., down all the way through all that stuff. So that's what I covered in detail is what I will cover on your exam. But keep in mind, you're only looking at the beginning of a very small snowball that rolled down the mountain that turned into a huge avalanche and almost destroyed the world economy because of it. Okay, I have another chapter I want to cover here tonight, and it has to do with dividend policies. And your textbook doesn't do much on it, but I think it's important that you know it. And there's a bunch of terminology that you need to know for dividend policy. Now, dividend policy refers to the amount of profits to be paid to stockholders. As dividends. Now, I did bring my highlighter here tonight, so let me start with all these terms, start highlighting them here for you, because these are some things that I'm going to, so make sure you can understand. If I ask you what's meant by dividend policy, it says, hey, company made profits, how much do we pay as dividends? And the other side of the coin, how much do I reinvest in the business? So one of those two things out there. Now, it turns out that there's two dividend policies. There's more than this, but there's two that I want you to be familiar with. And the first one is a dividend policy called dividend irrelevance. Irrelevance. I-R-R-E-L-E-V-A-N-C-E. Irrelevance. One thing you don't want to be is irrelevant. What would dividend irrelevance mean? Well, it means the dividend policy has no impact on the firm. And who do you think might have come up with this one? Modigliani. They were going out there saying whether you pay, your debt equity ratio has no impact on the firm. They said not only that, but the dividend policy has no impact on the firm. And I don't buy it. I think how much you pay in dividends and when you pay them has some value to the stockholders. The one that I particularly subscribe to is called the residual theory. And this one makes sense to me, and I think this is the way most firms do it. You reinvest profits as long as you have good projects. And then pay the remainder as a dividend. Reinvest profits as long as you have good projects. Pay remainder as dividend. What this is saying is something like this. I'm a new company. I'm a small company. But I'm growing. I've got all these great opportunities. Do I want to pay everything I get in as dividends? Heck no, I want to take and plow it back into the business. As long as I'm growing, everything's going great for me, and reinvest it in the business. When I no longer have good projects, better start paying it out as dividends. So older, large companies, mature companies, whose industry and projects and products are no longer growing, they should pay a lot of dividends. Small, new growth companies don't pay dividends. Okay? 20 years ago, would you want Microsoft to pay the dividend? Microsoft was growing like crazy. You want them to plow it back in and do things that make sense. Now, they might not be growing quite so rapidly. Maybe Microsoft should consider paying more in the form of dividends. Maybe yes, maybe no. There's a couple other things out here, though, some practical considerations. So these are some things that, you know, you really ought to take a look at. One is called the clientele. I have to double check to make sure I get clientele spelled right. I think I got it. C-L-I-E-N-T-E-L-E, clientele effect. Let me talk about this, and then I'll write a little bit. People own my stock. So I got a company and people own my stock. If most of my stockholders are 70, 80, 90 years old, what do they want? They want me to reinvest it for long-term growth, or they want some money right now to live on. They want dividends. My stockholders are mostly 20, 30, 40-year-olds. They want the dividends to live on. What do they want? Capital gains. They want it to grow. So clientele effect says, look at the age of your stockholders. Older stockholders want dividends. Younger stockholders want reinvested. So I put all that into a sentence. Look at the age of your stockholders. Younger, reinvest. Older, pay a dividend. You're saying, well, that's nonsense. Every company has older and younger ones. But some stocks, for whatever reason, seem to attract an older group of stockholders. And those stockholders want dividends. Some stocks, maybe like Google and so forth, my generation isn't going to invest in Google. I mean, hey, they want you to plow the money, but it's your generation that's going to buy Google. Your generation doesn't want dividends. Your generation wants to reinvest and have some growth out there. So look at what's going on out there. The other important consideration is called the information. Oh, I should be highlighting this. I quit highlighting these. Clientele, I wanted to highlight. Did I skip another one back here? Yeah, all these things I wanted highlighted. Make sure you get some stuff on those. The next one I have here is the information effect. Let me talk about this one, then I'll write a little bit here. If you're a stockholder and you own some stock in a company and the company announces they're going to double the dividends, smile on the face? You betcha. But not only that, do you think it's just a doubling of dividends in this one time period? Or do you really think that this company is telling you something? Like maybe we're really going to be doing well in the foreseeable future. The information effect says whenever you increase those dividends, you're telling the people that not only things were good last quarter, but they're going to be good for a long period of time. If you cut your dividends, you're telling your stockholders, yeah, we had a rough quarter, but it's not only a rough quarter, we're going for a prolonged period of time where things are not going to be going so well. So we got to take a look at it. So information effect. Change in dividends. Signals the market that there is a long-term change in the company. Change in the dividend. You send out a signal. You send up some smoke signals saying, ooh, things are going well or things are really going to go crummy. So change in the dividend sends a signal that there's a long-term change in the business, either positive or negative. So you got to know that one. Some other terms that I want you to know. A stock dividend and a stock split. These terms, especially the term stock dividend, gets misused all the time, including by the Wall Street Journal. They misuse that all the time. Sometimes companies are doing well, but they have a lot of good projects and they don't want to take their cash and pay it out as dividends. But they want to send a message to their stockholders that they are doing well. So what they will do is they will print up more shares of stock and send out additional shares of stock as the dividend. So a stock dividend is additional shares of stock as the dividend. Now, some people get all excited about this, and other people look at it and say, that's a financial illusion. Illusion, like we got a magician here. Why? Well, supposing they give me a 10% stock dividend. I own 100 shares, I now get 10 more, I have 110. Did the total value of my shares of stock go up by 10%? And the answer is no. When you get a 10% stock dividend, what happens to the price per share? It goes down enough so that the price times the number of shares stays constant. And that's why we call it a financial illusion. A stock dividend is just, the only person that really makes money on the deal is the printer. Whoever prints up the stock certificates is the only person that really makes money. So it's a financial illusion. You get more shares of stock, but the price per share goes down. Now, what's a stock split? Well, let me give you an example. I think it's easier than, for example, 2-for-1. What's a 2-for-1 stock split? For every share I currently own, I get one more share. I own 100 shares of stock. There's a 2-for-1 stock split. What happens? I get another 100 shares of stock. Did my investment just double? No. What happens with a stock split? The price comes down proportionately. Once again, a stock split is a financial illusion. So both stock dividends and stock splits are financial illusions. You don't get anything. Nothing of value takes place. So be very, very careful about if you look in the paper and you say, oh, I got a stock split. Oh, woo. Woo, woo. Doesn't mean anything. Only to the extent there's a signal out there and you're telling the marketplace that maybe this company's going to do better in the future. But in actual practice, it's just nothing happening. Now, there are 4 dates that I want you to know. And I have a time bar here. The first date is going to be called the declaration date. Today is May 30th. So we have a declaration date. I'm going to put a payment date out here, the other extreme. The payment date is June 29th. I picked June 29th because I have a grandson coming on June 29th. So, in honor of my new grandson, whose name my son and daughter-in-law won't tell me yet, so I don't know what his name is yet. But it's a son, and it's going to be a C-section, so we know it's June 29th. So pick those dates. Okay, so today's May 30th, June 29th. What happens on the declaration date? Declaration date. The board of directors meets. So the board meets and declares a dividend. That seems pretty simple. So the board, whoever runs the business, they have a meeting and they say, okay, we're going to pay a dividend. And what day is the check going to be in the mail? Well, the payment date check is in the mail. Check is in the mail. That seems pretty simple. A couple of problems along the way here, though. Who do we send the check to? Well, it's simple, our stockholders. Well, this is the stockholders on May 30th. I mean, this is, over 4 weeks apart. And over the next 4 weeks, there might be some people that buy and sell my stock. So when do I decide which stockholders are going to get the check? And the answer is, it's called the date of record. And I'm going to put that at, say, 6/15. That's a Friday, incidentally. I know that's a Friday. Date of record. So it's date of record is the date the company looks in its books to determine ownership. Date of record. So you have to be the owner on the date of record in order to get that check, that dividend check. Now, there's one other problem. For those of you that are really sharp, you're already ahead of me on this. Back when I talked about buying and selling stock, I talked about liquidity. And I said in the United States, it's T+3. You remember T+3? Stock, I really didn't have to pay for it till 3 business days later. If I sold the stock, I didn't have to get it to my broker until 3 business days later. Well, if 6/15 is a Friday, and they look in the books, they're going to see somebody's name in there. But what if that person had sold it on 6/14, on Thursday? Their name's still going to be on it because they've got a couple of days to get it there. What they do is they back up 2 business days. 2 business days. So in our case, it would be 6/13. And this is called and this is when I put it on the exam, everybody gets it wrong. So surprise me and get it right. This is called the ex-dividend date. When you put the prefix X in front of a word, it goes back to Latin and it means without. From the ex-dividend date onward, from this date onward, the stock sells without the next dividend. And it's actually a unique time in that date, like 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. I mean, they pick a point in that date. And some time when the market's open. And they say from that point onward, the stock sells without the next dividend. Let me give you an example. The board meets on May 30th and says on June 29th, we'll pay $1 per share. That's that payment date. To those people who are, on the date of record, the owners of the stock. So they're going to look in their books on June 15th. And anybody that's in their books on June 15th, they're going to get that $1 dividend. Whoever's in their books. If I sold it on the 14th, I'm still going to be on the books, and I have the right to that dividend. If I sell it on the 13th, if I've sold it from the point it went ex-dividend, anytime after that, I still get the dividend. What if I sold it on 6/12? But on the date of record, I'm still showed in the books. What will happen is the check will come to me, but I don't earn it because I sold it before it went ex-dividend. If I sell it before it goes ex-dividend, I don't get the next dividend. Now, I might physically get the dividend, but what's going to happen about a month later or a week or two later, I'm going to get a little note from the broker saying, you know that stock you sold it before it went ex-dividend. You got the dividend check. We want the money. You can come straight ahead on. I got a little quick side story on this one, and I'll let you out of here early. Several years ago, I called up. This is when this is back long ago that it was T+5 rather than T+3. So on a Friday, I sold some stock. I wasn't paying attention to where it was. The stock had not yet gone ex-dividend. So the following Friday, I went to the broker and they gave me a check for the price of the stock. About a month later, I get a dividend check. I go, oh, I thought I'd sold that stock. Well, that was neat. I took the money, took the family out for dinner. We had a grand time. About 2 weeks later, I get a letter from my broker saying, that dividend check, that wasn't meant for you. We want our money back. That dinner really was rotten. It just left a horrible taste in my mouth. I didn't enjoy it at all. My family, I think, enjoyed it, but it really sucked as far as I was concerned. So remember this, and this is a really important date, so you got to be careful. When you start buying and selling stock, if you do that rather than mutual funds, you got to be careful about that ex-dividend, because most stocks pay dividends every 3 months. So 1/90th, 1 out of 90 days, in business days, even a lot less than that, 1 out of 70 business days, is going to be where it goes ex-dividend. And if you sold it the day before, you're going to be on the books on the record date. You're going to get the dividend check. You're going to get a note from the broker saying, give us our money back. So be very, very careful about that. Personal experience, it's painful, especially if you're like me and you immediately blow it. Okay, I talked enough tonight, not as long as a little bit longer than last week, but not the full time. Next week it'll be a long session, so bring the padded seats with you. You need a little more time. Bring lots of note paper. I'm going to give you the McCarthy system of financial analysis, known around the world by a very famous professor. Now, I get baloney like that in the write-ups. Students always try to butter him, say, oh, we're going to talk about, don't do that. But anyways, I'm going to give you the McCarthy system. I'm going to give you the background behind and so forth. I want you to take good notes and be able to explain it to me. It's going to take you a page to 2 page, probably closer to 2 page, to write this up and explain it to me. And this is, incidentally, is to be typed, no handwritten. Somebody sent me some handwritten stuff last year. I couldn't believe it. Graduate students submitting handwritten work. Don't do that. So we'll do that next week. And then the last week, I'm going to talk a little bit about working capital. That'll be easy on you also. Have a good week, and it looks like it's Miller time.